I told my parents they were horrible and said they shouldn't have more kids. My father was 17. Both families decided it would be the best for me if effectively my maternal grandparents raised me and my bio parents got to live their lives. That is not to say I didn't know who my actual parents were. This is not one of those situations like in movies where the mother pretends the daughter's child is actually her own. I and everyone knew who my progenitors were. My father moved away when he was 18, but my mother remained in my grandparents' house until she was 23 and I was around 7, but that doesn't mean we were close. She always treated me more like an annoying little brother rather than a son. She didn't like spending time with me, never attended any of my school functions or showed interest in my academic work or took me to do any fun activities. Whenever I was talking about my day, she would roll her eyes or change the topic to shut me up. When she moved out, I barely saw her. She just came to family gatherings, said an awkward hi, and did not even look at me. It hurt even if by that point I already considered my grandparents to be more my parents than her. My father was still living away, they weren't together at this point, but would come once or twice a year to visit his own family around the holidays. He always made it a point to visit me and take me to do some sort of fun activities like going to the cinema or my favorite restaurant, but to me he was more like an estranged man than a dad, because when I compared him to my friends' fathers who picked them up from school every day, went to their games, played with them on the weekends, I didn't understand why this man who I saw maybe twice a year was supposed to be the same. Anyway, fast forward to a year ago. My father moved back to the same city where we live. He tried to hang out with me more often, but I wasn't really interested, although sometimes I complied. I don't hate him, I just don't know him. I even had a bedroom in his apartment, which is cool because he lives in the center of the city. Behind everyone's back, both my parents had started to hang out, and a couple months later they announced they were dating. It was a shock. They asked me to move in with them to my father's apartment, which I refused, but they argued that we could finally be a family. I was about to start an argument with them when my grandma just said that changing school districts would be very inconvenient and I could lose all my friends. The situation de-escalated by itself, although my parents didn't let go of the idea. My parents asked for me to spend more time with them, and this was particularly frustrating because even though I never had any particular tension with my father, I most definitely do with my mother. I don't like being around her, and she's treated me poorly my whole life, and I feel like she's now only trying to save face because she knows my dad wants me there. Now on to the issue. Last week they both came into my grandparents' house. They announced they were going to buy a house nearby in the neighborhood so that I can finally move in with them. I immediately said no, and when they said that changing schools would no longer be an issue, I found myself in a corner, and I said that was never the problem and that I just simply don't see them as my parents and don't want to live with them. That's when they dropped the bomb on us. Not only they wanted me to move in with them so we could be a family, but my mother was pregnant, so we were going to be a bigger family even. I was shocked and I blew my lid on them. I told them they were the worst parents in the world and that they abandoned me for 16 years and now they were going to bring another child into the world and do the same to them. And they never apologized for treating me like garbage, like a mistake they made, making me feel like I wasn't supposed to exist, dumping me to be other people's responsibility, and only now that they feel like they care, they want to be my family. My mother screamed back at me, telling me I was a brat and that she wasn't going to make the same mistakes twice raising her second baby, and I told her she never raised me to begin with, and my father said that they were young and trying to do the best they could. Well, guess what? The best you could was pretty effing bad. I stormed out and went to my sobbing. I have been very depressed for the last week. They have both called and texted since, but I ignored them. My grandparents agree with me that I shouldn't move and that my parents shouldn't expect me to be all loving and forgiving after how they've treated me. However, they believe they are starting a new chapter of their lives now that they are more mature and stable, which I guess leaves me behind. I've also had time to think that I'm the same age my mother was when she had me, and what a huge responsibility that must have been. However, I still can't forgive them. Ada for the way I reacted to the news? Edit. I've come to the conclusion that I have a lot of resentments and unanswered questions as well as misgivings about the future that I need to set straight with primarily my father. He needs to know how I grew up and I need to know why he abandoned me. I also feel like I need to warn him about my mother because I am worried about my sibling being abandoned and mistreated like I was, so I'm preparing a list of points and questions that I want to bring up to him, and we'll meet tomorrow or the day after and I'll confront him with all of these to hopefully get some sort of closure or resolution. I was bleeding out at the hospital, but my husband prioritized his friend over me. Ada for blocking my husband and considering divorce after him not prioritizing our family? I have not been feeling very well. My physical health has been decaying because of my periods. I lose too much blood. This affects my hemoglobin and the rest of the normal functioning of my body. I have seen the OB/GYN specialist, but they find nothing wrong in my reproductive organs. I got my period and went to the doctor's office because the pain was unbearable and I was losing lots of blood. When I arrived, my blood pressure was at the limits of normal 160. Doctors immediately transferred me in an ambulance to the nearest hospital. While I was being transported, I tried calling my husband and sent me directly to voicemail. I sent him text messages and no response. I then called my mom and my baby's nanny because I wouldn't make it home for a few hours. I was treated by doctors, they inserted lots of needles, but I was getting better. An hour later, my husband texted me back just saying that he hadn't seen his phone and asking how I was. I explained that my mom was with me at the hospital but our daughter was home alone with the nanny. He then told me that he couldn't make it home either. No explanation, he just told me, I wish I could and I would have gotten home early if I had seen the messages earlier, but unfortunately I didn't, so I can't. Excuse me? Your wife is at the hospital. Your daughter alone with the nanny, and why the heck he couldn't go take care of her? After demanding an explanation of what could be more important than his family, he told me that he couldn't make it home because his male best friend needed help. I was shocked. I felt unimportant and betrayed. Supposedly your family should be your number one priority. And we weren't his. I don't even care what his friend needed him for. I bet that could have waited in cases of emergencies like these. I am writing this down from the hospital still, just trying to get it off my chest. I blocked him. I don't even know if I really want to talk with him about how he made me feel. I am considering separation and divorce. If I couldn't count on him today, would assure me that this won't happen again? So, am I the a-hole? Update: this is not the first time my husband hasn't prioritized us. I guess I'm reaching my limit. Anyway, I unblocked him after a few hours because if anything worse happened, he had to be able to contact me and vice versa. So, I spent most of the night in the hospital. It was the first time I came in because of my period. I was pretty scared, to be honest. My vitals were sinking up to the point it was 80-50. Fortunately, my mom stood by my side the whole time. She said I was totally pale and unresponsive. I don't know what would have happened if she wasn't, because then I would have been all alone. Doctors gave me a blood transfusion and 4 liquids in order to keep me safe. My hemoglobin levels were way too low because of the amount of blood I had lost the past 2 days. I got discharged once my vitals were stable and I was feeling better. I really wanted to go back home to my daughter. She must have been scared too. I said it's my baby, but she's a 4-year-old toddler. As a mom, she's still my baby. I'm now resting at home after speaking to my boss that I was not okay and had a medical leave. I have my own income. I'm an elementary English teacher. Anyway, the nanny was very comprehensive and kind. She had to spend the night, so I obviously paid her the overtime and also a generous tip as gratitude. My husband never showed up. Neither to the hospital or home. I finally texted his male best friend to know what the F was happening, as he disappeared and clearly didn't care for me or his child. And we were right, it was not a life or death situation. His male best friend told me that yesterday he had an emergency with his mother and asked for my husband's help. Apparently she had a cold. That was getting worse, so they thought it was pneumonia or C-19. Fortunately she's okay and it was just a false alarm. His best friend, Bob, wasn't even aware I had spent most of the night in the hospital. It was not my call to tell him, it was not his fault. So I thought it wasn't fair for me to storm off over him while he had no effing clue of what was happening. I personally believe it is also important to support your friends, but what I don't understand is why he needed my husband specifically. He has siblings and his father who could take care and help his mom. I thought maybe he needed my husband's money, but he could have just transferred it to his bank account and come to our family. Instead, he spent the whole night with his Bob's family and stayed over. He left early from their house to go to work. In all that time, he didn't call or text to see how I was doing or if the baby was okay. I'm still very angry, disappointed, and heartbroken. I guess I just proved my whole point. Even though we are his nuclear family, we're not his priority. As far as I know, I could be dead and he wouldn't been seen up until my funeral. My friends and family are coming over in order to help me with my baby and to care for me. I'm feeling pretty weak, but after all, grateful that I'm alive. I'm still anemic, feeling weak, and we haven't spoken yet. And not even a freaking text to see how I'm doing while he's at work. I don't deserve this BS, neither does my daughter. I do love him, but I love myself even more, and I'm receiving not even the bare minimum. Edit: my husband and I finally spoke. He apologized and recognized he was wrong and kept on giving excuses. I listened to what he had to say, but I finally told him that this was a deal breaker for me and that we should separate for a while. I was not going to deal with his BS anymore, and neither will my daughter. I did not hesitate, not even once. I didn't cry in front of him. He was trying to mess with the wrong person. He packed up his stuff and left. I don't care where he went or with who, I just wanted him out of my house. As soon as he left, I broke down and cried again, but he will not hurt me or my daughter ever again. He has no idea I have a scheduled appointment with a divorce lawyer. He will be served soon, I hope. As for myself, I am recovering and feeling a little stronger. Crazy mother-in-law drove me to the edge, so I called off the arranged wedding. My future in-laws approached my parents on an arranged marriage platform with their son, Mark. Mark and I had known each other for 3 lovely months before we decided to get engaged. Our families got along exceedingly well, and his mother and I also had a good relationship. Once Mark and I got engaged, we started planning the wedding. Both my parents and my future in-laws came to an agreement about location, time, date, etc. Then, his mom, Jackie, flipped out and accused my parents of trying to get their way with the wedding festivities. We asked her why she felt that way, and she said she wanted the wedding earlier. But Mark and I felt we should have it in the year 2024. The month was decided too. Jackie wanted the wedding to be Indian style with fanfare. Indian weddings, in olden times, typically gave a lot of importance to the groom's mom by laying out a carpet for her, with the bride's side washing groom's side feet, etc. But this is not done in this day and age anymore. We heard from my Mark's extended family that this was what his mom wanted and was sad about. Since the bride's side is responsible for the ceremony, I asked my parents if we could have another traditional Indian ceremony and they agreed. We told her that we had tried to accommodate some of her wishes but said we could not change the timing of the wedding because I wanted to first prioritize my career. She cut off all contact with my parents, took me off her Facebook, deleted my number, and uploaded some pictures with quotes that were directed at me. I found that slightly immature but was too busy to give it much thought. Then, Mark told me she threw a massive tantrum at home and made some unsavory comments about my mother and me. She said, "That girl shall not live under my roof." Mark was frustrated with her behavior too. He said she got this way when things didn't go her way. But this tantrum lasted a while. It got so bad that Mark angrily left the house for a few hours. I was hurt that she had said things about me. Mark tried to tell her again that it was his wedding and that we had made a plan that we thought was best for us under the circumstances. There was a month-long silence after that, but Jackie and I exchanged messages on my birthday. Then back to silence. Mark had told me that his father was the voice of reason throughout and that he handled his wife. My parents were understandably upset with all this but they didn't confront her. Mark told me one day that Jackie told him that she was diagnosed bipolar in the past. I thought that explained the behavior but now I was hesitant to stay at their house. I asked Mark if he could move out before we both could live together. He said he would move out if things got worse. The week after that, Jackie threw a fit again. She said my father was a bad person and a scam artist. This broke me. I was still recovering from hearing this about my father when she also asked Mark to show him proof of me being a doctor. I'm an international medical graduate. He came to me and that's when I felt extremely devalued. I provided the proof but this broke me beyond anything ever could. Mark said he would move out if they insulted me further and that he would cut off all contact with his toxic mother. Jackie wanted a FaceTime call set up between Mark, me, my parents, and his. This happened 24 hours ago so I'm still processing it. We were told the call was to discuss the wedding plan once more. We were exhausted at this point but decided to give it a shot. The call was nothing about the wedding plan. Jackie and her husband called me out in front of my parents and asked me why I hadn't messaged them. I felt like I was on the stand. It took me a while to find my voice but I called her out on the hostility. She denied that she had ever taken me off of her contacts or uploaded the status or anything. She kept ranting and that was the first time I saw her crazy side. I kept silent. I just kept listening. My parents were shocked. My father-in-law wasn't being the voice of reason like I was told he was. It was like they wanted to create a rift, but she said something and I couldn't take it anymore. She said that I was marrying her son for his citizenship. I said, "Not only are you insulting my parents and me, but you're also insulting your son because you think he brings nothing else to the table except his citizenship. Mind you, this is an arranged marriage that they asked for." She yelled something and said, "You better know how I feel or we can stop the conversation." I said, "Thank you, we can stop the conversation," and ended the call. Then I called off the wedding. I think this call was done in bad faith and I think they wanted to call off the wedding either way. Mark says he will move out, but is worried about his finances. He had told me he had saved up enough for a car and apartment but he still hesitates to move out. When I called it off, I didn't trust Mark anymore. Plus, I had taken enough insults and I felt Mark would blame me in the future for cutting him off from his family. Mark and I had endured months of this toxicity from his mother and we were exhausted. He still wanted to make it work but I had had enough. I really didn't need someone to sponsor me. I had the education to make it on my own. Mark was a wonderful human, kind, calm, never angry, but I wanted to set us both free.
Am I wrong for asking for intimate boundaries between my wife and her gay, male friends? My wife and I have nearly divorced over this issue. It started while we were dating with one of her gay male friends that started slapping her in the butt. I asked for that to come to an end, and for her to have intimate boundaries between herself and her gay male friends. Fast forward 5 years to a couple months ago, and I saw a picture of her and the same friend where he had her bent over a railing with his hand on her butt, and his face in her chest. I was enraged and felt betrayed. We talked about it, and I decided to forgive her. 2 months later I see a picture of her at a wedding bending over making an orgasm face with one of her gay male friends right behind her pretending to grab her hips. I don't know what to do and I don't want to overreact, but I don't know if I can stay in this marriage. I am contemplating couples therapy, and likely eliminating gay culture from my life, but have not made any decisions yet. Edit, I should have left out the part of eliminating gay culture. I don't hate anybody for who they are or what they do. This is not my only negative experience with gay culture however, and even though not every gay person is the same, the culture is heavily involved with intimate activity. I would simply rather not surround myself with people who are seemingly ravenously intimate. Again, I know not all are like this, but the ones I have met have been. Now that it is playing a large role in deteriorating my marriage, I think it makes sense to distance myself from personal relationships with gay people, which is what I was implying. Since it apparently matters, I met my wife before either of us knew this gay friend. The initial issue happened within the first 2 years of us dating and our friendship as a group. I consider this gay person a very good friend of mine. I know for sure he was aware of the initial issue I had, and they both agreed to set the boundaries. Fast forward years and now married, I find out the boundaries have been shattered. They both are wrong, and I am struggling to not hate them. If my wife didn't want these boundaries, we could have easily separated back then, but she agreed to change because she wanted to continue in the relationship. I didn't wake up and actively decide that I don't want gay men to have free will over my wife's body. I think that upsetting me is pretty effing normal. Everyone defending gay culture is only reaffirming my distaste for it. Since apparently definitions are hard for some of you, let me clarify what homophobia is. Homophobia, dislike of or prejudice against gay people. I'll take it one step further with a definition of prejudice. Prejudice, preconceived opinion that is not based on reason or actual experience. I think I have had more than enough experience with gay culture to make an educated decision if I want to be around it, and I don't. You can hate me for that, just hate me at a distance, because I have no more patience for you. Flared this as give it to me straight because I just need people to be as honest as possible with me right now. I know I effed up, but I also need to know how to fix this. Edit, as far as I can tell, I really need to man up, get therapy, and give my wife some space. Some of the comments are brutally honest, but that's fine because that's what I needed. I've got a lot of work to do on myself and on this relationship.